Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to the second webinar in our Brain Health series. My name is Carol Rogan and I'm the coordinator of Dementia Research Network Ireland. Just a few things to mention to you. We're going to record today's session and it'll be available on our YouTube channel. So if you go onto YouTube and search under Dementia Research Network Ireland, you'll find the recording there. So it'll be available by the end of the week. Also, just to mention to you, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat and a Q&A button. So if you have any questions or comments either during the talk or after today's talk, feel free to type them in and we'll address them after the talk, after about 20 minutes. So I'm going to hand you over to our speaker today, who's Dr. Catherine Hughes, and Catherine is a lecturer in public health nutrition in University of Ulster. And Catherine will present for about 20 minutes and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. Okay, so over to you, Catherine.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I'll just share my screen. So Carol, thank you very much for those very kind introductions. So my name is Catherine Hughes and I'm a research scientist and lecturer in public health nutrition at Ulster University in the Nutrition Innovation Centre for Food and Health. And it's a real pleasure to be participating in this Brain Health webinar series. And there's a whole series of talks lined up, which should be very interesting. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to really talk to you about the role that nutrition plays. I'm going to talk about, can really the right diet help prevent dementia? So I'm going to give a slight overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the aging population and dementia. I'm then going to review the scientific evidence which linking nutrition with dementia prevention. And then I'm going to talk about some tips to help prevent dementia through diet. And then when the talk's finished, we'll have an opportunity for some question and answers. Okay, so the population is aging, and this has been a huge success. It's estimated that there'll be 2 billion people aged 60 years and over by 2050. And on the island of Ireland, we are now living longer and much longer than our parents and our grandparents. And that really has been a huge public health success. Unfortunately, whilst we're living longer, we're not often living free from disease. And what we see is that quite often people are moving into old age, but also develop a number of years of ill health. And really, dementia is a leading cause of disability and poor quality of life on the island of Ireland, but also across the globe. So it's estimated at the moment that there are 50,000 people living with dementia in Ireland, and that this is expected to triple by 2041. So we'll have over 140,000 people living with dementia. Therefore, we need to develop strategies that can try and look at, is there ways that we can really prevent the development of dementia in the first place, and to try and ensure that we don't really reach those huge proportions. So the prevention and treatment of dementia is a global health priority and also a priority of health in Ireland. So really, what is dementia? Dementia is not not a normal part of the aging process. We see small, mild changes in memory as we grow older, and that's normal. It only becomes really significant when it's greater than expected for a person's age and education level, and then that person could have mild cognitive impairment. If the changes in memory and thinking are severe and severe enough to impact our normal activities of daily living, then the person may receive a diagnosis of dementia. Dementia then is really an umbrella term used to describe a wide range of different diseases that affect our ability and our thinking and memory. And the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. So approximately 70% of dementia is due to Alzheimer's disease. And it's also estimated that if somebody with mild cognitive impairment, approximately 50% of them will go on to develop dementia within 5 years of diagnosis. So we now need, if we really want to prevent dementia, is to really try and understand all the different risk factors that can increase the risk of somebody developing dementia in the first place. As I said, there's a number of different diseases that cause dementia, and there's no single cause. And this slide here really shows you so all the different risk factors. Some of the risk factors, age is the biggest risk factor for developing dementia. So as we grow older, we're more likely to develop dementia. But some of the risk factors we can't do anything about. So, you know, we can't do anything about growing older. We can't do anything about our sex and our genes as well. But the other factors we may be able to do something about, some of our lifestyle factors. And today I'm going to talk about the role of diet. Most recently, a huge report bringing together the world experts on dementia estimated that 40% of dementia cases could actually be prevented, and if not prevented, delayed by targeting some of these risk factors. So that's great news. If you think back to that slide I showed that's indicated that we may treble the number of people in Ireland living with dementia. If we actually could target some of these risk factors, then that may never come to fruition. And I'm going to talk about nutrition and diet and dementia. So there's been a huge amount of research conducted looking at different diets and components within our diet, and whether they can affect our memory and thinking and prevent the risk of developing dementia. And here is an example of a few different components within our food or nutrients. So if we look first, our omega-3 fatty acids. So these are fats that are found in fish, particularly oily fish. And research has shown that if you have high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, or that you're a high fish consumer, then your chances of developing dementia are lower, and that you would have better memory than somebody with lower levels of omega-3 fatty acids or lower consumers of fish. Another and real hot topic, and something that's emerged more recently, a term you may not be familiar with, called polyphenols. And polyphenols are really little chemicals in our foods, and they're found in things like fruits, particularly berries, vegetables, herbs, spices, tea, dark chocolate, and wine. And there's a new and emerging research to indicate that polyphenols may also be important for brain health. And then moving on to vitamin D, then vitamin D is the nutrient of the moment. I don't think we can open the newspaper without vitamin D being linked with something. So vitamin D has also been highlighted as important for brain health. Studies have indicated that vitamin D is associated with a lower risk of developing dementia, and also with better memory in older people. Now, it's important to note that vitamin D is present in some foods, such as oily fish, eggs, milk, fortified breakfast cereals, and spreads. But the main source of vitamin D is sunlight. And unfortunately, Irish summers really aren't renowned for their sunny days. And maybe it's just a matter of making the rain that little bit warmer. So it is recommended if you're age 65 and over that you can consume a vitamin D supplement. There's also some limited evidence to suggest that vitamin C or vitamin E, which are antioxidants, may also be involved in preventing dementia. But really, there hasn't been enough research into vitamin C and vitamin E to make any firm conclusions. The most extensively investigated nutrients in relation to brain health are the B vitamins. So the B vitamins such as folic acid, which you might remember for being important in pregnancy, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, and riboflavin. And this is the area that I would work in with my colleagues in Ulster University and Trinity College in Dublin. And we have conducted a long series of research, which I'm going to show you shortly, investigating the role of these nutrients in relation to brain health. If we look at research across the globe, they would indicate that folic acid and vitamin B12 and to a lesser extent, vitamin B6 is important for brain health. So we get folic acid traditionally from our green leafy vegetables. But if we look at the foods that are regularly consumed in the Irish population, we can see that the main contributors of folic acid are green leafy vegetables, milk and dairy products, our breads, and our fortified breakfast cereals. Vitamin B12 is found only in foods of an animal origin. And again, if we look at our Irish National Diet Nutrition Survey, we see that the main sources are milk or meat and meat products, milk and dairy foods, fish, and again, our fortified breakfast cereals. If we look at vitamin B6 is found in a wide variety of foods, but the main contributors in the Irish diet are meat and meat products, potatoes, our fortified breakfast cereals, milk and dairy foods, vegetables, and fish. And then good sources of riboflavin are our milk and dairy foods, meat, and then our fortified breakfast cereals again. But if you look at all the research that's been conducted in this area, there really is strong scientific evidence to indicate that better B vitamin status is associated with lower rates of a decline in memory as people grow older. And it's also that better B vitamin status is associated with reduced risk of developing dementia. And we have, as I said, have been investigating the associations between B vitamins and brain health for a significant period of time through the TUDA study, the Trinity, Ulster and Department of Agriculture Aging Cohort Study. And this was a collaborative project between Trinity College in Dublin, St James's Hospital and Ulster University. And we may indeed have some people attending the webinar today that actually participated in this research study. So we would have collected data and a lot of information in 5,186 adults, either in the north or in St James's Hospital, and they were aged 60 years and over. We collected a huge amount of information on these people to try and look at the relationship between nutrition and healthy aging, and had a focus on brain health. And what we have in this study, we have three real big studies. So we have our people where we had 5,000 older adults. We then were able to follow up 1,000 of those people to look at the impact of B vitamins and other nutritional factors over time. And then what we did is we ran a study, randomized control trial, which is just an intervention study, which I'll explain in a few moments. But looking in the Irish population and in the TUDA study, what we saw was that low levels of vitamin B6 and low levels of riboflavin were each associated with poorer memory. And then that low levels of vitamin B6 and riboflavin were associated with a greater decline in memory over the 5-year period. And if we look at other research from other groups, this is consistent with what they would see also. What we then did, we conducted something called a randomized control trial, and this is called the Brain Hop trial. And what we did is we took a set of volunteers, so 350 people, we divided them into two groups. We give one group B vitamins and we give one group a placebo or a dummy pill. And what we did is we measured memory tests at the start, asked them to take the B vitamins or the dummy pill for every day for 2 years, and then we repeated the memory tests at the end. And what we saw was that B vitamin supplementation protected against a decline in some aspects of memory in those that were given the supplement compared to those that were given the dummy pill. And this was in healthy community dwelling older people. There also is evidence from other research groups, and particularly a research study in Oxford, where they showed also that B vitamin supplementation actually protected against a decline in memory in patients with mild cognitive impairment. And interestingly, they also were able to take images of people's brains, and they showed that B vitamins actually help maintain brain structure over time as well. But we don't really, when we're eating foods, we don't think about nutrients and the components within our foods. We really eat foods as foods or as a typical diets. And so I'm going to talk to you about two diets that have really attracted a huge amount of attention for their role in protecting the health of our brains as we grow older. So if we look at the Mediterranean diet, so this is a diet that we would associate, with Southern Europe. And we see that, the Mediterranean diet is high intakes of fruit and vegetables, nuts, olive oils. It has moderate intakes of fish and alcohol and low intakes of dairy and meat products. So it's a very nutrient-rich diet, and it's also high in healthy fats. If we compare that then to our diet, we have a high meat consumption, lots of processed foods, lots of confectionery. So it's more nutrient poor and has lower intakes of fruit and vegetables. And there's a huge amount of research into the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. And what it indicates is that the Mediterranean diet really is associated with better memory and thinking, slower rates of change in memory as people age, and it's associated with a reduced risk of developing dementia. And there's lots of research to back this up. A new and more recently developed diet, the MIND diet that you may have come across. The MIND diet, it really combines the Mediterranean diet with the DASH diet. And anyone that has hypertension or high blood pressure might be familiar with the DASH diet. So it really looks at combining the Mediterranean diet and also limiting our salt. And what they have saw is that this dietary profile, if you eat green leafy vegetables often, other vegetables, nuts, berries, whole grains, fish, olive oil, poultry and wine, and then limit red meat, butter, cheese, sweets and pastries, and fried and fast food, that you'll reduce your risk of developing dementia. And the big research that was done in this diet showed that if people followed this Mediterranean or this MIND diet really closely, they reduced their risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by 50%. And if you followed the diet loosely, you also were reducing your risk. So it really argues towards the idea that a healthier diet really can help prevent your risk of developing dementia. Also, so I've shown you now a load of different nutrients and how they are influenced with brain health. And I've also shown you the typical diets that are also associated with better brain health and reduced risk of developing dementia. But also it's important that nutrition also interacts with the other established risk factors for developing dementia. So, nutrition impacts obesity. So it's really important to maintain a healthy weight. Nutrition also influences hypertension, and midlife hypertension is associated with an increased risk of developing dementia. So it's really important, if you're at that mid part of your life, that you try and keep your blood pressure within a healthy range. And that will have great impact on your heart health, cardiovascular health, but also on your risk of dementia. Also, diabetes is a major risk factor for the development of dementia. And so it's really important either to try and prevent the development of type 2 diabetes, or if you have type 2 diabetes, to try and maintain your blood sugars and follow the diet as it's advised. And also cholesterol. So high cholesterol is also a risk factor for developing dementia. And again, it's important to try and keep your cholesterol within a low level. So I hope I have convinced you that nutrition does have a key role to play in preventing dementia. But really, we've talked about different nutrients and different dietary profiles. How can we try and prevent dementia through nutrition, and what does healthy eating look like? So this is the healthy eating food pyramid in Ireland, and what it says is, so this is a pyramid here. The foods that are at the bottom of the pyramid are the foods that we should eat more often, and the foods at the top of the pyramid are the foods that we really should try and limit and only use very sparingly. So if we think about our fruits and vegetables, these are the foods that we should be consuming the most of every day. So they are rich sources of vitamins, rich sources of fiber, and really we should be aiming for 5 to 7 portions per day. So a portion of fruit is like a medium-sized apple, or say something like two plums. Remember that fresh, frozen, canned, dried all count. And quite often, if we look at the nutrition surveys, we're not meeting this level of 5 to 7 per day. And what we really need to try and do is think of little ways to incorporate fruit and vegetables into our diet. We could add fruit into our breakfast cereals in the morning. We could have swap a snack with a fruit. We could have soups at lunchtime, add extra vegetables at cooking time for dinner. Also, if we think about our cereals, breads, potatoes, pasta, and rice, these are our main sources of energy, but really focus on the whole grain varieties. And also to remember, when I was talking about the B vitamins in particular, the importance, fortified breakfast cereals and breads, they actually have added vitamins and minerals. And so it can be a really good way to improve your B vitamin status or your vitamin D status. When we look at dairy foods, so milk, yogurt, and cheese, it's estimated that you should have 3 servings per day. These are rich sources of calcium, B vitamins, iodine, and protein. But the top tips here, really consider the lower fat, lower sugar options for your yogurt. Think about taking more milk and yogurt than cheese, and choose like semi-skim milk. Moving on then to our meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and beans, and we should have 2 servings per day. And a portion of meat should be approximately half the size of the palm of your hand. These are really good sources of protein, vitamin D, our B vitamins, iron, and omega-3s. And try and remember, we're surrounded by water and an island, but we're not great fish consumers. So try and aim for 2 portions of fish per week, including a portion excuse me, of oily fish. And then if we come back to our fats, spreads, and oils, really what we should do is, try and use these in very small amounts. And if we do use an oil, opt for a vegetable oil. And then, if we look at the very top of the pyramid shown here in red, these are our foods and drinks that are high in fat and sugar and salt. And we really should try and use these very limitedly, maximum treat once or twice a week. And finally, what we need to think about is hydration. It's really important that you consume for normal body systems, but also for our brain, that you consume 8 cups of water really a day. And everything counts, so you can have water, low fat milk, sugar-free drinks, and tea and coffee all count. To try and increase our hydration, you can include juice and water and hot drinks at breakfast. You can add fruit such as cucumber or citrus fruits to water to try and encourage drinking during the day. And then finally, you can eat foods that have high water content, such as soups, gravies, and jellies and such like. But going back to trying to prevent dementia, if we want to prevent dementia going forward and have a real meaningful impact and to reduce that prevalence, what we need to do is not to think about one factor in isolation. We need to think about all these factors in combination. And if you really want to have healthy brain aging, and the important thing is to remember that it's never too late to start, or you're never too young to start. And so really, if you can try and follow a healthy diet, so we've talked a lot about what a healthy diet now looks like. So, that's high consumptions of fruit and vegetables, about staying hydrated. It's really important to try and be physically active. So it's recommended that you should do 30 minutes of physical activity 5 days a week, but all types of activity count. So, this doesn't mean you have to be going for a big jog. If you're going to the supermarket, you could park your car slightly further away from the shop, so you're walking that wee bit further. This could be dancing, playing with your grandchildren, all those things to boost activity. If you're very inactive, even things like getting up from your seat, stretching, taking a walk around your kitchen, going out into your garden if you have one, all those things will have a good impact on your brain, but also your overall physical health. It's really important as well is to try and maintain a healthy weight and watch your waist as you grow older. And it's important for our brain in particular that you challenge your brain so that we use it, doing jigsaws, crossword puzzles, reading, and enjoying social activity. And I hope now going forward, I think it's something that we've really missed over the last few years, or the last year, is interacting with people. And we've had to do so many of these things like today online. But it's really important if you challenge your brain and interact with other people socially. And always the public health advice for the prevention and maintaining health is always to stop smoking and to reduce alcohol consumption. So we shouldn't have more than 14 units of alcohol per week. And if you do have those 14 units, it's better to spread them out over a number of days rather than to have them all in 1 or 2 sittings. But finally, and really the take-home message, if you want to prevent dementia, look after your heart. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. So, if you try the things that you would do to prevent heart disease, or also will help prevent brain disease. So try and keep your blood pressure within the normal range. Try and keep your cholesterol below a certain level, participate in exercise and all those things. So if we can try and address and make some small changes, we could really reduce the incidence of developing dementia going forward. So hopefully you have found that interesting. I'd like to thank all the collaborators that are involved in the TUDA study, and also for Dementia Research Network Ireland for giving us the opportunity today to speak about the role of nutrition and its role in preventing dementia going forward. And I hope you can see that nutrition really does play a key role, both directly and also mediating some of those other risk factors. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Catherine. That was a really interesting talk. I certainly learned quite a bit today, so no doubt everyone else did online as well. And I think it was made very accessible in terms of, as you said, sometimes it's the small changes, simple changes, and looking holistically at your life, to include diet and nutrition. So we have quite a few questions. And just to say to people who joined us a little bit later, the recording will be available. So we're recording this webinar, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. So the Dementia Research Network Ireland YouTube channel. And the slides will also be available on our website. So sorry, it's 2 different places you have to go to see the presentation, dementianetwork.ie. And if you look under the resources tab, Catherine's presentation will be available there later today. So some of the questions, we had quite a few questions on fortified breakfast cereals and what they are, what you mean by that.
Okay, so what we have is you'll see that certain breakfast cereals like, cornflakes, anything from Kellogg's, Nestle, even from many of the more generic brands from the likes of Lidl and stuff, have extra vitamins added into them during manufacture. So they will all have folic acid added into them. They also may contain small amounts of vitamin B12 and riboflavin and vitamin B6. Often they contain iron as well. And what we see is if someone consumes a fortified breakfast cereal, then they often have a better nutrient profile than someone that doesn't. And so it's a really good way of trying to improve your nutrient profile really through diet. And so eating a fortified breakfast cereal a couple of times a week will really have a dramatic impact on your nutrient status. And we see that in our TUDA study, that we see higher levels of deficiency in nutrients in people that don't consume a fortified breakfast cereal regularly. And this means that you don't have to eat it every day. I know quite often we like porridge, particularly in the winter months. But if you could, alternate between the two, that would have a big impact.
Great, thanks. And actually a question just came in there about the benefits of porridge. Would you say there's benefits to porridge?
Of course there is. So you've got, porridge, it contains oats, And oats have lots of benefits, fiber, they lower cholesterol, they also help us feel fuller for longer. And so it is a very beneficial way to start your day. But what I would suggest is that really you do it in a combination. So you could alternate between the two, and then you're giving yourself the best diet.
Great. And a question came in about the sugar levels in breakfast cereals, actually. And I suppose sugar generally then might be interesting.
So what you need to do is, when you're some of the fortified breakfast cereals can be high in sugar, so go for the lower sugar alternatives, so like the more bran derived ones. It is important, and probably something we didn't touch on today in great detail, in relation to diabetes is a major risk factor for the development of Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia in particular. And so the best thing that you can try and do is to prevent the development of type 2 diabetes. And so we do have to watch our sugar intakes. So go for the low sugar options if we can.
Mm-hmm. And somebody was just asking there, say with porridge with nuts and seeds, would that be better than, say, the fortified breakfast cereals?
Well, I don't think you can say that one would be better than the other. I think what you need to try and think about when you're thinking about diet is it's everything in moderation. You have to try and eat a wide variety of foods to get all the nutrients that we've talked about. So you can see I showed you a whole range of different food sources. The best way to try and get those is really to have a varied diet and eating lots of different food groups and different combinations on different days.
Question here about frozen food, example, frozen fish, frozen veg. Does it give you sufficient vitamins?
It does. So I think in the past, we always felt that frozen foods were inferior. And the research has shown that actually they are really good sources of our vitamins and nutrients. And so they are a very good alternative. And also if you are living on your own or, so buying and getting access sometimes to fresh fruit and vegetables, particularly if you live in a rural community and are no longer driving, can be very difficult. So frozen foods help limit waste, but also sometimes are more easily accessible in rural environments.
Yeah, great. What level of B vitamin supplementation was used in your study?
Okay, yeah, so what we did, and at our centre, we're really focused in nutrition at dietary levels. So we intervened with dietary levels of the different vitamins. So for folic acid, it was 400 micrograms per day. For vitamin B12, it was 10 micrograms per day. For vitamin B6 and riboflavin, it was 10 milligrams. And if we look at the National Diet Nutrition Survey in Ireland, what that was the top end of what we would achieve through our diet. And so it was really showing that intervening with low doses of these vitamins can actually protect against our memory. The other study that I mentioned, and the one that gets a lot of press, was the VitaCog study conducted by the university, Oxford University. They use bigger doses of the vitamins, but again, we think intervening with a dietary level, you need dietary levels. You don't need mega doses of these vitamins.
Someone asked, is there such thing as taking too much vitamin B?
Well, what there is, so a lot of these vitamins are water soluble, and so you will excrete them if you take too much. But again, you don't want to be overdosing your body in these vitamins. And it's important that if you are going to consider the use of a supplement, you discuss it with your GP or maybe your dietitian, but always try to go for vitamins at the dietary range. And you'll see in the back of the bottle, it'll say, it's 100%. Of the RDA or whatever, and you don't want to go for any more than that. You don't really want to take mega doses of these vitamins, but also as well, if you eat a balanced diet, you should be able, if you're healthy, to get a good supply of the vitamins from your diet. If you have, for example, certain diseases or you're using certain medications, then you might not be able to absorb the nutrients in your food just as well, and then might need to consider using a supplement. But a general supplement, you don't need to take lots of different ones. And again, if we think back to vitamin D, it's recommended if you're age 65 and over that you take a vitamin D supplement, because it's very hard to get the required levels of vitamin D from our foods, and we're relying on sunlight. And as we grow older, we mightn't spend as much time outdoors, and the ability to make vitamin D decreases.
Great. Someone asked as well about your study. Did the people getting the placebo also have a diet low in B vitamins, or were they getting some B from their diet?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So this is the problem when we do nutrition research. When you're running these types of nutrition studies and you're running what we call a randomized trial, when you're intervening with food, everybody consumes foods, some levels of foods in their diet. So we would have went in and we would have gave the supplement above their normal diet. We tried to select people that would have had lower levels of intake, but they still would have been consuming some levels of B vitamins within their diet. And when you're looking at nutrition studies per se, it's not like a drug trial where you can, give a medicine and give a true placebo. Everybody's diet contains some level of these nutrients. So our people that were in our dummy group would have had, both groups were matched in terms of their baseline intake. So we tried to look that everybody was the same starting. And then the only difference that we were making was that one was receiving the B vitamin supplement and the other was receiving the dummy pill. And the volunteers, nor I, or the other researchers involved in the study didn't know who was on which pill until the very end. And then we actually held an information evening where they came back, and the people that were on everybody thought they were on the B vitamin, and so some were surprised then when they heard that they were on the dummy pill.
Yeah, great, thanks. For someone with osteoporosis, how does one get enough calcium, and is cheese recommended?
Well, so if somebody with osteoporosis, obviously that's a medical condition as well. So you will be prescribed medications that may contain calcium and vitamin D already. Also, dairy foods in particular are a really good source of calcium and vitamin D. What I wouldn't recommend is if you have a diagnosis of osteoporosis, I wouldn't go and buy any over-the-counter supplements until you discuss it with your consultant or dietitian, because your medications may actually contain calcium and vitamin D in them already.
Yeah, okay, great. What levels should we seek to attain for B6 and B12?
Well, what we want to have intakes of approximately 1.6 milligrams per day. And what we see is actually, if we look at dietary intakes in Ireland and dietary intakes of B6 and B12, they're not actually very low. But what it is we just need to try and prevent, that lower level to try and improve the levels. And what we might see is that B6 seems to decrease with age. We don't know the reasons why yet. And it might be that we need to incorporate more B6 into our diet and more vitamin B12 as well. Our ability to absorb B12 seems to decrease with age.
Okay. And a question about oily fish. Is farmed fish a suitable source?
Well, I don't know 100%. Farmed fish will have still levels of omega-3s, but there is lots of debate out there whether farm fish has the same nutrient profile, but I don't know off the top of my head direct comparisons, so I best not answer that.
Okay. And in relation to wine, is there any difference between white wine or red wine in terms of benefits?
If we look at the Mediterranean diet, it is the red wine in particular. And also if we think back to the polyphenols, those chemicals that we've mentioned are very rich in the red wine and in the grape. And so, it does seem that red wine would be more beneficial. Okay. But again, we're talking very moderate amounts of red wine and not big
quantities. Yeah. Have there been any studies looking at cognitive function in older adults who've been vegan for a portion of their life, and would a vegan diet likely lead to a higher chance of developing dementia?
I can't recall any studies. That doesn't mean that they haven't been investigated. If you are on a vegan plant-based diet, there are many advantages of a more plant-based diet, but there are certain nutrients, particularly vitamin B12, that you can't achieve from within a vegan diet. So you need to really think about, if you are looking at your plant alternatives, that you use alternatives that are fortified, that they have these extra vitamins added into them, or you do consider the use of a vitamin supplement. I think, the idea of vegan diets, I think that's an area of research going forward, because we are moving towards this whole idea of that more plant-based diets and food sustainability, that we will be looking at the impact of the vegan diet on mental health going forward.
Are natural vitamins, etc., in food better than a supplement?
Tricky question, but really, the advice is it's food first. So if you can get your nutrients from your foods, that's the best place to get them. And then, but if your diet is lacking, then a supplement and getting supplemental vitamins help improve your status and reduce the risk of developing certain diseases.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. There's some more questions here. Again, something about the vegan diet, supplements. So there's a few themes going on there. Okay, natural sources. Yeah. Okay, tablet forms of supplements. So are a tablet form of supplements, zinc, vitamin C and D, on a daily basis okay?
Well, that's always something on a personal level that needs to be discussed with a dietitian. I'm not a dietitian, and so can't really give dietary advice. But as long as you're taking vitamins that are within the normal range and not taking mega doses, they will have, there would be unlikely to be any harm.
Okay, great. Would you recommend Irish rapeseed oil or olive oil in cooking or in salads?
Well, the idea is, if you use, they do recommend that you use vegetable oils in cooking, but again, the idea is that we use them very sparingly. So you use very, very small amounts, and both olive oil and rapeseed oil are both oils that would be useful to use, but again, try and not use them in large amounts. So if you think back to that healthy eating pyramid, the fats and spreads, all types of fats. So we need small amounts of fats in our diet and the good fats. But again, we only need very small amounts of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about low or no sugar drinks? Are sweeteners added not as bad as sugar?
Oh, that's a very controversial one as well. So, to say, the non-sugar sweetened beverages for someone that they're not going to take water will have health benefits. We have to, the big thing is we have to reduce our sugar consumption. If we can try and drink water and milk and things like that, that's fine. But if you are going to go for, you do want a beverage that has that sweet taste, it is better to go for the sugar-free version with the artificial sweeteners rather than going for the sugared beverage, because the sugar beverage is the one then that will increase our weight and be associated with diabetes and everything.
Can drinking Complan help?
Complan, yeah. So Complan can help, it can be fortified as well, so it can help boost our nutrients, but whether that has an effect in brain health, I'm not too sure. I don't think it's been investigated.
Okay, and there's a question about how much vitamin D is recommended per day.
Okay, so in Ireland, there's actually slight differences in Northern Ireland and in the north and in the south, but in the south, it's recommended that you take 15 micrograms of vitamin D per day. But if you do not go outside very often or housebound, then that increases to 20 milligrams per day, or micrograms per day, sorry.
Okay. There's a question about a portion of fish. So is a fish portion the same size and weight as a meat portion?
Yeah, so what they're saying, if you're looking at portions of meat and fish, it's approximately about half the size of the palm of your hand. And when you're thinking of fish, to try and consume one portion of oily fish per week. So that's like, mackerel, salmon, tuna.
Yeah, okay. Are the B vitamins good for men as well as women? So I don't know if there's a sex difference.
Yeah, okay. So no, the study that we did looking at brain health, we had males and females involved in that study, and I don't think any of the research that's been done has been done in one gender particularly. So folic acid is important in pregnancy as well. Might be where this question is coming from. So folic acid is important for the prevention of neural tube defects in pregnancy, but that's one health benefit. These vitamins also are really involved in different aspects of health throughout life. And so we would do research right through from pregnancy into older age. So it's not just for women's health.
Okay. There's a question about cheese. So according to the MIND diet, you should only consume cheese once a week. Yet cheese is recommended for calcium, protein, etc. Do you agree with MIND?
So what they're trying to say is cheese is one of these things, that there's lots of conflicting advice upon. And if you go back again to the Healthy Eating Guide and that pyramid, we have to eat 3 portions of dairy per day. But again, it also highlights that you need to, take more milk and take more yogurt and limit cheese, but cheese is still part of a balanced diet and should be consumed, but in moderate amounts. This again gets back to the idea that everything in moderation.
Okay. Is vitamin B2 beneficial?
Well, yeah. So vitamin B2, so that's riboflavin, is probably one of the B vitamins that hasn't really been investigated in lots of great detail before. And so our centre would be one of the few worldwide that actually measures vitamin B2. And what we have saw is that vitamin B2 is important for brain health, which hasn't been reported by others, but also that it may be associated with hypertension. And in people with a particular genetic factor, that vitamin B2 can actually help lower blood pressure in people with this genetic factor, which makes them be hypertensive. And so it is important for health, but I think it's been largely overlooked until the last few years.
Re fat levels in yogurt, what is too high a level?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but try and go for the ones that, if a food states that it's low fat, if it states it's low fat, then to have that message, it has to have it. It has to be low fat, and the same for sugar. You're not allowed to put claims on foods if they don't meet an acceptable level. Okay. And that's set by the European Food Safety Authority. So if you're marketing foods of these things, the food manufacturers then have to comply with those recommendations.
Okay. Should we try to eat organic food as much as possible?
Again, from a nutrient point of view, the research really doesn't indicate that organic foods from a nutrient point of view are any way superior to non-organic foods. Now, you could get into the debate to talk about pesticides and everything else, but from a nutrient point of view, there really isn't the evidence to suggest that they're any different.
Okay. And what about wheat? Is that best avoided?
Again, going back to that, the best dietary profile contains everything. If you think back to that food pyramid that I showed, the wheat-based products should be consumed 3 to 5 times a day in combination with rices and pasta and everything else. So really shouldn't avoid, in my personal opinion, avoid any food group, and that we should all eat them in moderation. Now that comes with the fact if you're healthy, if say for example you have a particular gastrointestinal disease, you may be asked to avoid wheat for a particular reason, but for the general population we should be aiming for eating all foods and not excluding anything.
And there's a question here about a celiac diet. Does that lack sufficient nutrients?
Okay, yeah, that's a great lead on actually. So with people with celiac disease, they are at risk of not being able to absorb their nutrients from food. So patients with celiac disease will get very specific dietary advice. And what we see then, if they follow that diet, their ability to absorb nutrients is better. But quite often you'd find that patients with celiac disease will receive specific advice to try and ensure that they don't develop nutritional deficiencies. So they may be prescribed a supplement, but it's the best if you have celiac disease that you discuss your diet really carefully with your dietitian, and they'll make specific recommendations for you. But we do see, if we look at research, that patients with celiac disease can have lower micronutrient status, and then may be at risk. So it's important to optimize nutrition and nutrient levels in people with celiac disease.
And some questions about how you can tell what your vitamin level is and what you might need more of. So is there any way of knowing that?
Well, the way we do it is we collect blood samples. So you can do it two ways. The research really focuses in two ways. You can measure what people eat in their diet or what they say they eat in their diet, because sometimes what they really eat and what they like to tell us that they eat mightn't be exactly the same. So what we did in our CHUDA study, and we collect blood samples from all our participants, and then we measure those biomarkers. But again, that's a very costly process, and your GP might measure some nutrients if they thought you were at risk of deficiency, but they're not done just standardly.
Okay. There's a question here about the RDA. Is it the same for older people as younger?
So what we find is that for B6, we have a slightly higher level recommended for older people. For B12, we don't make any assumptions or we don't make any differentiation, but in the US, for example, they would recommend that people over at the age of 50 should take vitamin B12, not only from foods, but also going back to they should also take them from a fortified food. And that's just because there's a high level of malabsorption of this vitamin with age. And if you take it in a fortified food or a supplement, they think that you can absorb it. And actually for folic acid, the recommendation is slightly lower because we are no longer in that stage where women are at risk of having a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you advise regarding the benefits of soya-based products?
Okay, yeah. So at our centre, there has been some research done, particularly for women's health, looking at the benefits of soya on cognitive function in sort of that midlife. And that research is currently ongoing here. So it'll be interesting to see how it finishes off.
Okay, we'll have to arrange another webinar, I think, and there's so much interest in this topic. There's a question about coffee versus tea or herbal tea. Any thoughts on that?
Okay, so coffee is one of those things that has actually moderate amounts of coffee consumption has been associated with better brain health and memory. And also tea as well, because again, these are rich sources of those polyphenols as well. And so there has some research, but again, there's little bits of research that have been done, but we couldn't conclusively say if there were any direct benefits and whether one was better than the other.
Okay. And someone has asked why one should minimize the use of vegetable oils.
Oh no, they should. Well, you have to have some small amounts of fat in your diet. So if you're going to choose an oil, go for a vegetable oil. But we don't need large amounts of fat in our diet. Because if we increase our fat, then that increases our cholesterol, may lead to weight gain and everything else. And so that has an impact. So we just need to use these things sparingly and in moderation.
Okay. And someone has asked if we should take a break from supplements, or is it okay to take them on a continuous basis?
If you're using a supplement, you can continue to use it, but also you might find that some people may take a supplement in the wintertime or for certain periods of time. But for our nutrients, again, it comes back, if we have a balanced diet, we should get everything we need. But if you use a supplement, there's no real advantage of stopping and starting. But if you feel that you are lacking in your diet is lacking in something, then taking a supplement for a short time may be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a few questions about fish. So is tinned tuna good quality tuna?
Okay, so that was one of the things when you think about oily fish, tinned tuna doesn't count as an oily fish. So it's a portion of fish, but we wouldn't count it as a portion of oily fish. So it has to be fresh tuna, or if you're thinking about your oily fish, your salmon, mackerel, those sorts of things.
Okay. And is shellfish as good as oily fish?
So shellfish is a good source of omega-3s as well. You can have shellfish, but again, you do really need to go and try and get that portion of oily fish every week.
Okay. And then a question about mercury in fish. So fish like tuna and sardines, are they high in mercury, which is bad for cognitive functioning?
Okay, so this is another real controversial area. These are fantastic questions, to be honest. So what we do, and our centre actually has been involved in looking at the effects of fish consumption and mercury over 30, nearly 40 years now. And what we see is that the benefits of fish consumption actually outweigh any of the risks associated with mercury exposure.
Okay, great. So we might just go through one or two more questions. Is that okay, Catherine? I'm conscious of you're very good bombarding you here with lots of questions. Would you recommend super milk?
Okay, that's something that you have in the south. I don't think we have it up here, but I think from memory that's a super milk is something that is fortified with vitamin D and other vitamins. So again, it's a bit like your breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
If if you want to try and improve your nutrient profile, and a super milk might help you do that.
Okay, and this is a question that I'm interested in because I like my peanut butter, but how healthy is peanut butter made from 100% nuts?
Yeah, well, it's one of the ones that's more, it contains more of our good fats. But again, we have to, these are the things that we have to use in moderation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we might just finish on one last question. Any comments on fermented foods like kefir? Because I know there's been quite a bit of talk about fermented foods in the last number of years. So
okay, I'm not familiar with a lot of research on fermented foods. Some fermented beers might, be a source of vitamin B12, but I'm not aware of any large bodies of research that have looked at fermented foods and brain health.
Okay. So we still have more questions, but obviously we've run out of time. So we're going to run a kind of wrap-up webinar on the 24th of May, and Catherine is free to join us that day. So we'll be kind of touching on topics that we haven't had a chance to fully address in the webinars. So it'll basically be all the speakers from all the different webinars will be joining us on the 24th of May if they're available. So you can book through Eventbrite, the same Eventbrite website for that. So apologies that we haven't been able to answer all the questions. I think we've managed to get through a lot of them. And thanks so much, Catherine, because we really were bombarding you there with lots of questions, but really, good questions. And there's obviously a lot of interest in this area. In terms of, as I said earlier, what I'll do is I'll email everybody the links for the presentation on YouTube and also our website where you can look at the PowerPoint presentation. Next week, we're going to have a webinar. My colleague Sinead is just showing it there. Step Up to Your Health, What a Group of Retirees Taught Me About Brain Health. And that's going to be delivered by Dr. Annalisa Setti from the School of Applied Psychology in UCC. I know all our webinars have actually been sold out. So we had, 500 tickets available, if you like. And so there's been huge interest, which is great, but it's a pity that, not everyone can join us that wanted to, but they will be recorded and they will be available to view afterwards. So that's good. So just to say thanks again to Catherine for a really interesting talk and for answering all those questions for us. Thanks to Sinead Grennan, one of our network members who's in the background helping out with the technology side of things. And thanks to everybody who joined us today, and have a good day, and hopefully see you next week.